When we talk about international education or global education here in the United States, the truth is what they would call that in most other countries in the world is education. And so we have had this kind of odd false distinction here because much of the world has always taught about the world, and we're trying to figure out how does that happen here. The next economy is a science and knowledge economy, and we need that scientific and technological literacy. Our next economy is a resource-challenged economy, and we must be developing the kinds of critical thinking that are moving us more towards sustainable development and sustainable economies in the world. The next economy is a globally interdependent economy. The global financial crisis, what's happening right now with the European Union. Here in the United States and in most other countries around the world, we all are enjoying a greater and greater demographically diverse economy. But it's asking us to then develop those cross-cultural competencies, those cross-cultural leadership skills to be able to work effectively in that economy. And then last, we're an innovation-driven economy. And it requires students who can learn how to learn and to adapt to a changing global context in order to survive and thrive. So this is just an overview conversation about global competence. It really has three big components. The first piece is knowledge of world regions, cultures, global and international issues. The second piece are the skills-based piece. How about communicating in languages other than English, working in global or cross-cultural environments, and using that information from different sources around the world, triangulating the information that we have about an event in time from various perspectives. That's a skill. And then the final piece is a much harder one to get our hands around or our heads around. The values and perspectives of respect and concern for other cultures and people, and like why in the world it matters that we care about those on the other side of the world that we know nothing about, even though we know that we're becoming more globally interdependent. We also have new global trends that are driving us. We have human security and citizenship challenges that we're trying to confront as a nation and that many other countries around the world are trying to confront. And most of them are international challenges. We are not going to solve global health issues, terrorism, global warming, climate change, whatever, our water shortages worldwide. Those are international challenges that we have to address in an international context in our world. We certainly know our security is intertwined across cultures and across the nations. And obviously we have an increasing diversity in our schools and workplaces that requires us to have a different understanding of the cultures and backgrounds and lived histories of the children that we're serving in our schools. And of course, we do have the competitive talent pool. Right now, only 50% of high school students study a world language at all. I don't know how much you know about the PISA exam that was created through the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Andreas Schleicher, who's marvelous, and if you ever have a chance to hear Andreas speak about education worldwide, it is well worth your time. Andreas was actually one of the developers of the PISA exam, and it asks students not to regurgitate past information that they've learned, but to actually take new and novel information and do something with it. And this is where we fell in the United States, 31st in mathematics, 17th in reading, and 23rd in science. We may be teaching the static content related to those areas, but we are not teaching our students how to use that information in new and novel ways and apply it in substantive ways. And that is why our PISA exams are where they are right now, because we have been driven by a very fact-based, standards-based curriculum here in the United States. So even the most prestigious organizations in the world, this is from the Committee for Economic Development, these are the folks who created the Marshall Plan after World War II, they are calling for us to, in education, to step forward and help our students have the knowledge of foreign languages and cultures in order to compete in this new global economy. Otherwise, they say, we're being handicapped on a global scale here in this country. It's about recruiting and preparing internationally oriented teachers, which is what we're going to be focusing on for the next few days. It's about taking the curriculum and instruction and integrating international content into it so that students are learning about the world and that they're learning the same skills, but perhaps contextualized in a more meaningful way about current global issues, about statistics about the world in order to do mathematical manipulations, all kinds of ways that we can do that. It's about emphasizing language proficiency, and I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room about that. And it's about expanding student experiences, which this conference is just a haven for all of us who want to think about how do we travel abroad, how do we immerse students in another culture, how do we allow them to see the world through others' eyes other than their own, how do we bring students to our own campuses to broaden that experience. And so these are the pieces that when push came to shove, if we could work on infusing these into our K-12 system, we felt like we were moving in the direction of that. It's the capacity to use those disciplinary methods of inquiry creatively and productively. So how, as a scientist, do I use my scientific research skills in ways that help me understand the world? How, as a mathematician, do I use what I know mathematically to explain the world, to explain phenomena, to document events in that sort of way? It's also an ability to understand prevailing world conditions, issues, trends. Those are the things we typically think about when we think of global education. But we want that to happen both through disciplinary and interdisciplinary ways, right? Because we know most of our challenges in the world are not disciplinary in nature. And the last one is about substantive engagement over time with the world's complexities and interrelatedness. So the first competency that we talk about is the ability to investigate the world, that kids can ask a question of importance, that they can identify an issue, generate a question, explain the significance of that both locally, what does it mean to them in their own community, regionally, or even on a globally focused arena, right? Those researchable questions. Can we get kids to ask questions? Second, can they use a variety of language and domestic and international sources and media to identify and weigh relevant evidence to address that question? Third, can they analyze, integrate, and synthesize that evidence that they've collected to come up with a coherent response to some globally researchable question? And finally, can they develop an argument based on compelling evidence that considers multiple perspectives and yet draws defensible conclusions? These are huge. Second, recognizing perspectives. So it's one thing to investigate the world. It's another thing to know that we all have our own perspectives that we come by based on our experience, our background, our families, our lived realities, and that other people have experiences, backgrounds, lived realities very different from ours that shape in different ways their perspectives on issues. And how do we help students recognize when it's their own perspective, recognize others' perspectives, and figure out the median ground in between? How do we explain how cultural interactions influence situations and events or phenomena, including the development of knowledge? The third idea is around communicating ideas. How do they recognize and express that diverse audiences can perceive different meanings when we say things in different ways, right? There's a cultural component to communication. How do we listen to and communicate effectively with diverse people using appropriate verbal and nonverbal behaviors, languages, and strategies? Those are huge skills. Every world language teacher tries to hit it, bullet number 2, we hope, right, in the communication piece. How do we select and use appropriate technology and media to communicate with diverse audiences? So how do you then allow kids to study about very challenging world issues and yet have a sense of efficacy that, like, I can do something about this, that it isn't disempowering but empowering? And that's where we came up with this fourth column. We said it's great to learn about it all, but then we have to move them to take action. And so how do they translate these ideas and findings into appropriate actions to improve conditions?